Right, it is time to kick off the webinar. To those that have joined, thank you very much for spending the time with us. I can see quite a number of persons from United States, from Canada, and also from South Africa. So just a shout out to those in South Africa. We know it's a bit late on your side, but thank you for spending the time with us. Right, so the focus of this webinar is on various receiving strategies within the DATASCOPE software itself. What we intend to do in this session, which will probably be between 35 minutes and 40 minutes long, is just to talk through a number of different ways that product can be receipted into the warehouse with some different strategies, starting from a fairly simple purchase receipt, going into more sort of complex versions of receiving that exist within the DATASCOPE software. As always, all questions can be posted to the questions section within the webinar itself. So if you have a question, feel free to pop it in there. And once we've done the presentation at the end, we'll go through the questions and we'll address any of your specific questions. Okay, so without further ado, I think let's get straight into it. Just need to close this quickly and focus over here. All right, so just a quick overview on the strategies that we'll be looking at today. There's 7 of them. We'll start off with a very simplistic standard PO receipt, purchase order receipt. We'll then go into a slightly different version of PO receipt where we are processing what we call a receipt all, and then we are palletizing the receipt and putting it away. We'll look at a function within the software called PO pre-receipt, where you actually receive the goods onto the floor, pre-scan them, and then bring them into the software. We'll look at a very simplistic scanner-based PO receipt, which is really works very well, but only in certain environments, and we'll explain what those environments are. We'll then look at the LCT side, so landed cost tracking, and how we deal with landed cost tracking shipments. And there's a number of different strategies there. We'll briefly talk through those. And then we'll just look at a simple GRT out and GRT in, and then a kind of a SCT environment where you're doing an SCT supply chain transfer in your main distribution center with a GRT in on the other side. So we'll be covering these different points. On each slide, we'll kind of I'll position the functionality and the main key points around that functionality, and then Amy will actually show the software and kind of step it through on the software. All right. Okay, so the very first one is the normal standard straight simple PO receipt within the DATASCOPE software. So if you look at the little flow along the bottom there, starting on the left-hand side, a delivery would come in from some sort of supplier. Supplier would arrive with their truck. First thing that would happen is you take the product off, you would take the delivery note, and you would double check it against the product that's delivered, sign for it, right? Good, we've received the product. From there, we would put the product onto pallets on the floor, and we would manually make a note of what products have gone onto what pallet. Remember, this is a fairly simple receipt, so there is a little bit of manual work involved in it. We would then take that delivery note into the office, into the local receipting clerk's office, where the receipting clerk will process the receipt, including during the receipt, allocating out each pallet and what is on the pallet, all right? On processing the receipt from within the DATASCOPE software, we would automatically process the GRN. We'll process, print out each individual tracking ID, in other words, a unique label per pallet, which understands then what products are on that pallet. So it may have multiple stock codes, multiple products and lot numbers on the pallet. And then obviously we can now, once those labels are on the pallet, we can get the forklift to come and pick them up and take them away into the warehouse. One or two things about this is obviously that the GRN kind of happens after we've packed out the product on the floor. We then do the receipt in DATASCOPE, which generates the GRN, and we can only put that product away once the GRN is completed and the labels have been put out. So essentially, if you look at that last point there, the put away happens after we've completed the full receipt. So Amy's going to jump in and just kind of step us through the way the software works in a scenario like this before we look at the next one.
Unmuting would help, hey. So standard DATASCOPE PC-based screen. The user would come in to receipt the purchase order. I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger there and tee up my first purchase order. There's an option to add a delivery note number, which a lot of our sites use to for GRN tracking later. And then you can see it would list out the lines on my PO receipt screen. There's an option to hide the lines if they're complete or not, because we know how big some of those POs can get. So the first line I'm going to go and receive is some bottles, and this user would look on their delivery note that's come in from the floor and say, okay, well, I see that we received a total of 1,500 from the supplier, but how that actually is laid out on the pallets then can be described here by right-clicking on allocation. And here you can see the screen has automatically populated my track ID quantity with 500. So that's looking at the SysPro inventory warehouse full pallet quantity. So even though I'm receiving 1,500, it's saying, well, we think you should be packing this out on pallets of 500. That's normally how the stock is packed. So if I tab down twice, the software will automatically fill out pallets of 500, each from your track IDs, each of 500. Each line here represents a separate track ID that will be created and printed at the end for me to apply to the product. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that there. And I get a green tick to say the quantity that you've received or quantity that you're saying you're receiving, you've allocated out to all these pallets. I'm going to do the same then for some colorant here and show you a slightly different scenario. So if I say I'm going to receive 150 of the colorant, click allocate. Here I don't have a unit quantity set up at all. So if I put in something like 100 for this, now it's going to try and work out how to split that. So it's going to put the first 100 on a pallet and then the remaining 50 on that. And I can go ahead here and type in, I could swap this and retype this in as 40 and put that in as 10 if I really wanted to. But I'm not going to do that. Let's go in and allow it to, sorry, that was a bit silly here. Do that again. Okay, 2 green ticks. And now actually I look and I see that my receiving staff have unpacked this and put flavorings and preservatives onto the same track ID. So I can go ahead and click on multi-stock code track ID. And then I can say I'm going to put some, what is that, flavorings, the first one, and put some stock on here. It's giving me a lot number, so an automatically allocated lot number. I can replace that if I want to, now or later. And then I'm going to go and put some more stock onto this pallet. So I'm building up this pallet 2350 here. And I look on my sheet that the operator's filled out, and I have another 1,500 of this, let's say. And I can create track ID. So it's creating that track ID in the background. Now I have green ticks for everything. So now I can go ahead. So now the everything's kind of teed up, ready to go. And I can finalize, and this will push it through to SysPro. Sorry, that's my window popping up. But first, it's going to give me some lot numbers and some lot expiry dates, and it's calculating those expiry dates based off the shelf life in SysPro. So here we've gone ahead and recommended that shelf life based on today's that expiry date based on today's dates plus the shelf life in SysPro. And if I had to push it beyond that, it's going to warn me that that's a problem child, that, watch out, you are extending this, or you're entering this expiry date from your supplier, and it doesn't make it quite so much sense to us. And then obviously if we have no shelf life set at all, it's going to wait for me to select an expiry date. In this instance, I could put 0000 or null in for no expiry date products, or I can enter my own one with the date picker there. And I could have, sorry, I should have shown that, but I can replace the lot numbers there if I want to put in the supplier lot numbers. Now we get a GRN returned, which means the stock is in SysPro. We can go put those pallets away. I can go and have a look at those pallets and show you what the printout looks like. So we would have got, and now I've minimized this, but to show my emulator just now, but you can see here we've got a bottle that's got 500. We've got another bottle for 500, another bottle. There's my colorant again, and then there's the pallet with flavorings and preservatives on it. Sorry, it's small. because I've got this size slightly smaller to show an HTML5 screen a bit later. So now the stock could be put away, and we can go and have a look at what got received there. If we go look under information check, and we go and look for purchase order 490. And there we can see my pallet sitting in here. So depending on your inspection settings as well, and we'll cover that in another webinar, those pallets would be on hold if you're going to have inspectable products. So that would be a very basic receipt ready to put away based off whatever the users have come in and explained to you what's on the delivery note. So I'll stop share and let Anton talk through receipt all.
So just to recap, truck comes in, delivery note, we make a note of it, we do the receipt on the front end of DATASCOPE, we allocate out the pallets, how everything's packed, multi-SKU pallets, single SKU pallets. We do process the receipt, get a GRN, get the labels, put the labels on the product, and go and scan them away, right? Now we'll show you a second option. You are seeing the screen, eh?
Yep.
Cool. So here's a different way of doing it, right? So here what we want to do is a truck arrives, we get a delivery note, we check the delivery note, but we want to do it a different way around. We want to take the delivery note into the receiving clerk's office and let the receiving clerk do the receipt of those quantities, but just receipt them all in one shot, right? Which we have an option called a receipt all, and that takes those quantities and receipts them straight out, does the GRN, and gives me one track ID, one master tracking ID, which is normally a document. It's not normally a label. It's a full document with a list of the products that have been received. It's normally got the unique track ID, the master track IDs, a number barcoded up at the top. And now what I do is I go into the scanner and I print a number of blank track IDs, new track IDs. I put them out onto the pallets, and I use the scanner using a function called receipt palletization, and I scan the product onto the pallet, product by product. So here I'm kind of taking a big pile of boxes. I've got my pallets out on the floor. I put a unique ID on each pallet, and I'm scanning each box, and I'm scanning it onto the pallet to build up the pallets. And one of the big benefits of this particular method is the fact that if it's a fairly large receipt, because I've actually processed an initial receipt all, Syspro has the inventory, the GRN is there, and therefore as I build up the pallets, immediately that the first pallet is good to go, a forklift can come and fetch it, scan it, and put it away into the warehouse. I don't have to wait until I've processed the whole receipt to the end. I can kind of build pallets and put them away as I go. So we'll have a look at this particular scenario.
So as Anton said, it's definitely helps with clearing the space on the floor if you've got a limited receiving space, but it does rely on you having trust in your supplier's delivery note. So if you're going to key in the quantities to say same PO or copy of the same lines on the PO, obviously a lot more of you have many more lines. So if you're going to put in the same, if you're going to put in these quantities, you better be sure that these are right, and that they haven't, that you're not getting it wrong compared to what's actually on the floor. You've got to trust that the delivery note coming from your supplier is the accurate quantities, or you'd have to do some stock adjustments after the fact and maybe a negative receipt. So
normally speaking, just to be clear, the truck would arrive, they get the delivery note, you double check the values, right? So, there would be, if there was a dispute, you dispute it on the delivery note, only sign for what you received. That would go into the office. And in that yellow block, they would only put in what is actually being received, right?
Sure.
But in this process, I'm kind of not allocating out the pallets, I'm just receiving it in one shot and then scanning the product onto pallets to build up the pallets.
Yeah. So I've gone ahead and clicked allocate all there, which is going to remove any pallets that I built up. So you can't do it kind of a hybrid. You can't say allocate all and multi-stock unless you're going to do two separate receipts, and put it all into one track ID. Let me say yes. Now here I've automatically just created a track ID in the background. There is an option for the software to prompt for the track ID number that you'd like to use. So some sites are using that as their unique, they could put the delivery note there or something. but it helps them identify it some more. And then I go ahead and finalize. Again, my same pop-up appears. I'm just going to give this one an expiry date. Same concept applies for being able to change the lot number and expiry date and all that. And then what would print out is I've got currently my configuration to be labels, but I've got a sample here, one I did earlier. So something that looks like this with a master track ID number here and saying this is all what we've got in here. So it would be a letter, sheet, portrait or landscape. So now we are going to go and unpack those pallets. So the truck's arrived, we've GRN'd it, the stock is in SysPro and sitting in a receiving bin in DATASCOPE, which means that nobody can reserve it. They go into the scanner. Go and find receipt palletization. The first prompt that comes up is, would I like to print any labels? So what am I going to unpack onto? I need to have labels on those pallets to unpack onto to scan those. So I'm going to say, yes, I'd like to print 5. And click that. And I've got a little printer here that's going to be spitting out my documents. And so we get something like that coming out. So close that. Now we're going to move from the pallet the big master pallet that we had, which was 2291. So they'd scan the document, which you could print multiple copies of. Everybody's unpacking the truck, and that is essentially the truck that they're scanning it off. Okay. Now the option is to scan or select the stock code, and this is configuration as well. So if you want to do it completely blind, not have them the option to drop down, make sure that all the barcodes are working on the product. If I select a stock code, I can come down and do that, and now it's waiting for a lot number to be entered or scanned. Obviously, it's looking for the lot number that I did the receipt on, so that's not going to help there. So the lot number, we are assigning a lot number. This wouldn't be your supplier's lot number unless you'd overwritten that in the receipt. It's automatically prompting me with a quantity of 5 because that is the pan size for this product. So that's the size of the boxes that we expect it to come in. But I can overwrite that if I want to. It's optional.
So just to touch on that, what one expects to happen here is you've got a big pile of boxes now. You've got a pallet, you put a pallet label onto it or a track ID onto it, and you turn around and you scan the first box. So you're scanning the master track ID and then you're scanning the box, the product on the box. That may have your internal SysPro stock code on it. In all likelihood, it's actually got a supplier barcode on it. We use the barcode cross-reference table to reference it. So if you scan the supplier's barcode on the outside of the box, we'll refer that back to whichever stock code it is in SysPro. We'll then default down the bottom and say, what is the standard pack size? In this case, it's 5. And we'll actually say, okay, you're putting 5 onto, and which pallet are you putting it onto? You're scanning on the pallet. So operationally speaking, the guy standing with the scanner is scanning box, pallet, as he builds those up across there. If he wants to take a whole batch of them, then obviously you can scan one of the boxes, override the quantity and say, no, I've actually got 25 here. So enter the 25 and just move them all across onto the pallet as he builds the pallet.
Correct. So here I'm just going to push one box onto here, and then I'm going to show you the scanning of the alternate track IDs. That could post. Sorry, that's me grabbing a random pallet number. Let's grab the one I just printed out. Rebeller 2361 23. And some good validation coming in there because I'm typing in nonsense. Okay, so it's just moved the quantity of 5 across. But as Anton was saying earlier, 2292 is our master pallet. If I come in here and I start scanning in the barcodes from other, the supplier cross-reference or something, it's going to resolve my stock code. So it understands that I put in a whole string of numbers there, understands that that is the stock code for the supplier, and resolves it to find my stock code. And now I seem to have grabbed the wrong one. Let's grab a bottle. So, now demo time. Let's go out of here. 3292. Let's see, palletization. Where's he gone? So if I put in my bottle stock code, oh, it's not resolving that one. So I might have made that one wrong, but we saw the concept remains. This could be my data setup. So I'm going to come in and move my pallets, my boxes box by box, or the full quantity across to whichever pallet numbers I've spread out on the floor. So ideally, you lay out 10 to 12 pallets and then start unpacking the truck. So I can keep building up on that.
Just one thing about that is obviously the pallet label that is on the pallet is a little different. The concept's a bit different. A lot of guys, when they do the receipt, print the pallet label with the stock codes on the pallet label because they're pre-allocating it, right? In this particular case, it's different. If you look at that track ID, it's just got a unique number and a barcode. So what you actually find now is if you walk into a warehouse that typically receipts like this, if you walk up to pallets don't have stock codes or descriptions on them at all. They simply have a unique ID. And if you scan them, obviously the software will tell you what's on that particular pallet. Works pretty well, but obviously because we're printing the label up front, at that point, we don't know what you're going to put onto the pallet.
Right. So here's what I put onto that pallet, and this information check screen would be available on the scanner as well. So there's no need for it to be on the label anymore, what we're saying. Cool.
Right, let's look at the next one. Okay, I need to share here, just hang on a second. You seeing that?
Yep.
All right, so just to recap, delivery happens, we check the delivery note, we put the quantities in, we do the receipt up front, we get a full document, a master track ID, we then scan, we then print a number of labels and we scan product to pallets. Benefit here is as soon as the first pallet is done, the forklift can take it away. All right, let's look at the next one. Now we've got a PO pre-receipt. This is a complete blind receipt, right? So this method, the truck arrives, we do the delivery note, we double check the product, we bring it onto the floor, but now we build the pallet before we do anything, right? So we print a couple of pallet labels, we put them on the pallet, we scan the product onto the pallets to build them up, and only once we've built them up do we then open the software, take a look at what has been received, which then matches against the outstanding purchase orders that you have on file, shows you where there's any issues, and then from that screen, you can process the receipt button, and the receipt will then go and do a number of GRNs, because it could very well be that that truck arrived with product on it off multiple purchase orders. There are a few caveats to this. During the build-up of the pallets, we do need to know the purchase order number. So normally the delivery note number, the delivery note, we ask the supplier to put the delivery note as a barcode and put the purchase order numbers as a barcode just to make it easier to scan, because as I pack the product out, I do need to reference the original purchase order number as part of that process.
So I'm first going to show you, if I just start scanning blind, you won't see how far we are in this process or not. So this is what the review screen would look like. So the supervisor would be watching this screen while the pallets are being built up. And as you can see here, we've got a number of purchase orders that are currently being received at the same time and built onto pallets. So each stock code is matched against this purchase order because as Anton mentioned on the screen, you're saying which purchase order you're receiving. The software validates that stock code is in fact on the purchase order and lets the supervisor know here, and then ensures that the quantity scanned matches that on the PO or is undershipped, which is okay. The challenge or the supervisor's role would be for them to find items in red here where we've got unknown stock codes on the PO. So this
or an overship. So either one.
Correct.
So green basically means they delivered exactly what the purchase order asked for. Blue means they've just delivered less than the purchase order. No problem there. They just haven't given you exactly what the purchase order says. But a red one is a problem. So a red one could be that they've said I'm delivering product A on purchase order 12345. But when we look at purchase order 12345, we don't have that product on that purchase order at all. That would turn red. Or we have an overship. So it is on the purchase order, but the purchase order had 100 and they've just delivered 120. In which case, to get that cleared, the receiving clerk would either have to up the purchase order to say we're going to accept those extra 20, or we've got to go back to the scanner, take it back off the pallet and say we're returning it and overshipped it, in which case that view would go green and then we can process the receipt.
Correct. So the post button is currently disabled and it would only be enabled when I've got blues and greens here, because then I can actually post. So we're going to go and have a look. I'm going to go and scan some more stock and show you what the scanner looks like for this. Let's close out of here. I've got pre-receipt. That's what the functionality is, or the module is called. And the first thing it's going to prompt for me is, what type of receipt are you doing? Because while we're only showing purchase order receiving here, the same is available for an LCT and a GITN. So the same concept applies. You'd have to supply the LCT shipment reference, the vessel, or the goods in transit reference. So again, it's going to prompt me, would you like to print some pallet labels? What are you unpacking onto? I'm going to print 3 of these here. You saw how well my pre-printed ones are working out. And here I can optionally select a printer. I've only got one printer on this box, so I'm just going to select that one. Okay, and this is where my prints are popping out to, so I just want to grab one so I can see the number. So we're going to palletize onto pallet number 2364, but we're first going to say what purchase order we're doing, and here I'm choosing purchase order 485. And then I could either enter or scan the stock code. Again, the alternate barcode applies. Again, what we call our alternate barcodes, or a barcode cross-reference. You can see I've scanned that number into that. We have a table that stores all the barcodes that you could use for a product. And it's gone yellow for me to select. So what it's done is it found 2 matches. It said, are you talking about B1214 or B1215? Because we can have the same barcode, the same UPC code referred to 2 stock codes. And that's something new that's come in that I think a lot of people were battling with. That the supplier would give you a new version of something, but with the same UPC code. So as far as they're concerned, it's the same thing, but for you, it's 2 different stock codes. So I'm going to select B1214 here, and we're going to put in a quantity of 160. And this is going to go into the track ID that I would be scanning back here, which is 2364. And if we go and have a look here, we saw we were 160 short there. So now if we look at 45 on there, we should be matched, which we are. My eyes are going woggy.
Yeah, it's matched.
So that would be the concept, is to keep unpacking and then keep using the screen to unpack per PO your stock code onto the track ID. That is it.
Cool. Right, I'll show you again. Right, you should be seeing my screen now. Okay, so that was PO pre-receipt. Obviously, just to recategorize it, you're doing a blind receipt, you're building up the pallet, and then you're comparing it into SysPro and doing the GRM. Again, just to put away is you've got to do the whole receipt, complete the receipt, and then you can start putting the product away. The next one is a scanner-based PO receipt. So where this is used very effectively is where you have a few, 1 or 2 or 3 very large suppliers that deliver product into you consistently, right? So if you look at the photograph there, that is one of our clients. They make corrugated cardboard boxes, and they have trucks that come in there with these rolls of paper, and literally that truck cycles between the supplier or a couple of suppliers in the vicinity, fills up the truck, and they deliver in, and they'll do it 10 times a day. So kind of every hour the trucker will arrive, and there's more rolls of paper on there, and we want to process the receipt, PO receipt straight off. Now, in a case like that, I can go to the supplier and ask the supplier to label each of these rolls with their barcodes and so on, but included in there, ask them to put a unique ID, in other words, a track ID, okay, and actually print it onto their barcode. So when it comes to us, we don't have to put our own track ID number on it. We can actually piggyback off their track ID and simply use their label to process the receipt. So this works very effectively if the relationship is with the supplier. You can get the supplier to pre-label the product the way you want with a unique ID on it, and the receipt process is extremely simple here. We also use it in large food companies where, as you can see in the image down below, these are big bags of spices or product like that. And again, you have a large supplier delivering in, you know, on an hourly or bi-hourly basis, big bags of product that are pre-labeled with a unique ID. So the idea is the truck arrives, it's full of bags or big rolls of paper, and an operator very simply takes his scanner, opens up a ScannerBased PO Receipt, and simply scans each of the track IDs, which are big bags or big rolls, and processes the receipts straight from there. So we'll show that to you quickly.
Okay, very quickly, receipt purchase order. We'd put in, select or scan your purchase order number. There's a specific list of purchase orders here. They have to have a indicator to say that those are the ones you're looking at, so you're not completely bombarded with a whole lot. And enter a supplier delivery note here.
So just while Amy's talking through that, what is important here is part of this thing is when the customer or the supplier labels the product, we also ask them on the delivery note to have the purchase order number and the delivery note number barcoded, so it's easy to scan, and ideally to have the purchase order number and so on the label itself on the physical product. That's a bit more difficult to achieve, but certainly if we have it on the delivery note, it's easy to scan. So scan the purchase order number, scan the delivery note, scan the stock code, and in we go. We bring these things in one by one.
Okay, and again, the drop-down box is optional, but whether you allow stock code scanning or you force it into stock code, or you can do a drop-down for extra validation. You can see I put in a UPC code there, and it resolved the stock code, and now I can put in 100. And then this is the point where Anton's talking around the track ID number that would be the supplier's track ID number or a unique number on there. And we do validate to check that that number doesn't exist already, but I'm just going to type in some random stuff here. And as you can see, as I tab off, it starts building up the total for that stock. So I can keep going on this. This makes it very rapid because I can keep going on that stock code over and over and over again, and it slowly starts doing totals for me. And then at the end, I can confirm the whole lot, or I could reset that stock code.
Yeah, so another time it would actually give you some sort of error is if you scan all the rolls of the truck, and when you process the receipt, the purchase order says is insufficient on the order or something like that, then you'd have to deal with it. So the guy on the floor would go into the office and say, the truck's just arrived, I've scanned all the rolls here, and for whatever reason, I've got extra rolls that the purchase order says there's insufficient. Generally speaking, these are normally, because it's high volume, these are blanket purchase orders, and therefore the receipt happens extremely quickly. So if you look at this particular client with the paper here, a typical receipt of about 20 rolls takes as simply as fast as the forklift can take them off the truck. You're scanning them as they come off, and the receipt takes place when the last roll is taken off. It's extremely fast, very efficient way to receive. But yeah. What's important is it can only work with suppliers that you can work with to get the labeling right on the inbound side. That scanner's PO receipt can also work with other receipts. So you might say, okay, for these two suppliers, we're going to do a scanner-based receipt. Everything else remains in our normal receiving strategy.
Yeah, I think that's key to remember is that all of these, we could be running them all. It's not a huge configuration change to swap from the different receiving methods. You could pick and choose different methods based on the suppliers or the stock codes you're receiving. So the scanner-based one as well, you can't mix stock codes on a track ID. So you may say, okay, these big bulky things we're going to bring in using the scanner-based. The other stuff we're going to consolidate, and then the last ones we're going to use the pallet build-up, depending on what you're handling and how your supplier supplies that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. The next one is just on the LCT side. So this is really built for customers where you're importing a huge amount of product. It comes in containers. You're using the LCT module in SysPro to build up the shipment up front. So SysPro knows there's a shipment coming in from India or China or wherever it's coming. We know the shipment reference number. We know what products are in that shipment. And this process means the truck arrives with a container on the back, drops off the container for destuffing. And we've got a couple of different strategies of how to receive those in. The first one we're going to show you, there's 3 strategies in total, but the first one we're going to show you is the most used one. And the most used one is, and this is only really applicable if your customer or your supplier, sorry, palletizes the product inside the container. So in other words, let's say the container is coming from China and they are actually palletizing the product in China, putting the product on pallets, and the container arrives with pallet loads of product. They can send you a packing list up front that says this is what's in the shipment, this is what's on each different pallet, and we can actually import that packing list directly into the receiving screen, which does all the allocation to track IDs. We then process a full receipt of that LCT. We print that, then prints out barcoded track IDs for all the different pallets. And as you destuff the pallet, you're matching up the track ID with the list of products on it to the pallet, and you're putting on the pallet and then putting them away. And the big benefit here on those type of pallets or those type of shipments is normally when you're destuffing containers, the put away process is long-winded. This way around, we get the shipment up front, we built up the shipment in SysPro, we get the packing list before the container actually arrives, and when the container arrives, we do the import of the packing list, do the receipt, print all the labels, and then as the product comes out, as we take the first pallet out, we match the track ID to the pallet, and we go and put it away straight away. So it's a very fast and efficient way of processing the receipt. But there is a key here that the container has the product on pallets that come in. So we'll look at this one first.
Okay, so the LCT receipt screen in DATASCOPE, one lonely shipment sitting there. So this is my LCT coming in. I've got 2 purchase orders. And this is the import button to go and fetch my file. This calls our plugin architecture. So you could write a custom DLL to do all sorts of fancy validation or fetch files from wherever, but we've got a basic option to go and fetch a file here, which has to be a CSV file for this DLL that we've written. And I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. I just want to give you the, show you the results of it here. If the demo gods are on my side, there we go. So it said to me, update receipt total. Sorry, I clicked yes to that very quickly. And as you can see, immediately I get the green ticks. Much like in the PO receipt screen, it's saying to me, the quantity that you said you're receiving, you've allocated out to pallets. The extra validation on the LCT screen is that the shipped quantity does match the quantity that you've said you're going to receive. And why we don't have a green tick here is I've told the software no, or the CSV file has said, no, I'm only receiving 380 for this line. So this would require some investigation, and that's just to show you the validation there, to go in and say either our packing list is wrong or we need to adjust the LCT and redo the costing on that. To give you an idea of what this packing list looks like, and just to give you some insight into it, and I'll pop back in there in a second. I don't have headers on here because it's a CSV file, but this is my purchase. These are my purchase orders, so 483 and 44 are the purchase orders, the line numbers, the stock code, and now depending on the plugin that you've built, the DLL, you maybe don't need the stock code as well. Maybe you just need purchase order and line number, or just purchase order and stock code, and would do the matching. But here is the column that's interesting, and this is the pallet number. So each line can be split over multiple pallets. So here I've got line 5 repeated a number of times, and I don't have a pallet number put in here because it's going to assign a new pallet number for me. So DATASCOPE would automatically assign pallet numbers for those records. And these two, I decide I'm going to put on the same pallet, so 2 lines on the same pallet, and I'm going to give a pallet number for it. These are here, I'm mixing lines, and here I've mixed 2 POs worth of lines. So there's quite a bit of flexibility involved here in how you can tee up that receipt in those pallet allocations. And this functionality of import your LCT shipment is just wrapping up. I think it's just entered the QA section and testing for our PO receipt screen. So you'll be able to do the exact same thing on the PO screen too as well, which I think will save quite a few receiving clerks some time if they can quickly just map it out and then import it, especially if your supplier is more compliant and sends a packing list up front.
Yeah, and just to touch on that, in terms of that packing list, that would obviously mean that you go to your suppliers and you say, I want an ASN file, Advanced Shipping Notice file. They would use some sort of EDI messaging service. So every time they ship to you, they would generate a ASN, a shipment file, and a messaging service, some sort of messaging service like SBS Commerce or somebody like that, Gateway, would go and pick up that file and come and drop it off into a folder on your side, when the shipment arrives, you would simply be able to go to the import function, import file, find the file name, and select the file name to pre-populate the receipt and then process the receipt. So certainly is a good step towards automating an EDI connectivity between your supplier and your DATASCOPE receiving department.
Sure.
All right, let's go on to the next one. I just need to share my screen here. You should be seeing that. All right, the next two I'm just going to talk through. We're not going to demonstrate them because they're exactly the same as what we've seen in the purchase order side, but they're for LCTs. So we also allow you to process an LCT receipt just the same way that we did the very first PO receipt. In other words, you open the LCT. Well, let's put it this way. Truck arrives with a container. The container has a big packing list. We unpack the container, we identify how the stuff is packed, or we pack it physically, okay? And then we take that whole packing list into the receiving office, and on the LCT screen, we actually manually, like we did on the first PO receipt process, we right-click on each line and we build up the pallets, It's a long and slow, long-winded process, but that facility does exist, and quite a number of LCT receiving clients of ours actually do that, right? They build up the pallets manually up front, do the receipt, print the labels, put the labels out into the product. So that's just referencing the fact that that does exist for LCTs as well. And then the other one is the receipt hall. So just like the PO one, where we could put in the quantities, click the allocate all button at the top that just kind of builds up all the pallets in one shot, and then receipts them and prints all the labels. We can do exactly the same on LCTs as well. We just want to point out that the functionality is consistent. What I can do in the PO receipt screen, the different methods on the LCT screen, we can essentially do the same, exactly the same processes, right? So that's just touching on that. I don't think we need to go into that too much more detail. Right, then let's move on to GRT. So on the GRT side, we have two scenarios. I'm going to explain the first one first. The first one is a very simple GRT out, GRT in. And that's typically used where I have a factory, and the factory produces product, does job receipts, and on the job receipt of each pallet, they put the pallet label onto the pallet, and that pallet needs to move to the distribution center. But the distribution center happens to be a few miles away, right? It's not where your factory often, you do the receipt, you put the label on, and you do a straight immediate transfer to move that product straight into the warehouse. This is built for where the warehouse is actually a little bit, it's in a different building, right? So what I want to do here is scan each pallet onto a truck, and then I drive the truck around the corner and I scan each pallet off the truck on the other side. I'm not changing the dynamics of the pallet. As I received that pallet off the job, I put a label on it. I'm simply moving it from point to point, but I want that to do a GRT out and a GRT in, and I want some documentation to go with it. So what this is actually doing is allowing me to scan multiple pallets onto a truck, get a document, put it in the truck drives around the corner, 10 minutes later, arrives at the distribution center, and I simply scan those off the other side. So that's the simple one. And then we have the more complex GRT solution. Here, this is very different. This is a distribution center now picking orders for sub-distribution centers. So let's say you have one very big, large distribution center, and that fulfills orders into your branches, right? And you've got smaller distribution centers or retail shops maybe out in the field, right? So the smaller distribution centers on maybe a daily basis or weekly basis, they place an SCT order on the main distribution center that goes in as normal in Syspro as a normal sales order process, but flagged as a SCT order, and then the full process is assigned here. So in that case, because it's a sales order marked as a SCT, it drops down into a proper picking slip. We use the whole picking process to go and pick those products, to collate them, to pack them. We go through a normal checkout process where you're checking them, labeling them, and so on. And then on the completion of the checkout, we are processing a GRT out. Essentially, we're completing the SCT, which creates the GRT in Syspro. We get a GRT document that goes on the truck. The truck then drives 20 hours or whatever down to one of your distribution centers. When it gets into your distribution center, because we did the picking of this, we know what the pallet configurations look like, which means that on the receipt side, at the sub distribution center or the retail store out in the field, I can simply scan the GRT document and then scan each pallet, and put it away into stock straight away. So very quick and easy process to move them. But the two scenarios here is, first one is just a straight GRT out and in. Second is I'm actually formally picking an SCT, checking it out, packing it on a truck, and shipping it to a distribution center. So over to you, Amy.
So if I go into, I'm just going to show the in transaction for both of these. So I'm going to go to gitm, and here the user would scan in their GRT reference number. And immediately the software is going to ask me if I want to relabel anything, which I don't need to if I've got full track ID. So here it's listing off the track IDs that were scanned on the truck on the other side. And org status stands for original status. And this is pretty cool because if you are running an inspection module, you've got pallets on hold for a reason, but you do need to move them from the manufacturing facility to distribution or something, we will maintain that status. So it is going to list off the status, and then if the original status was on hold, it will put the pallets back on hold when it reactivates them in the new warehouse. So it, oops, helps if you scan it correctly. So what it's telling me there is that it's gone green because I've scanned the full track ID, and I'd continue to scan them all and optionally clear the scans. And then there's another tab here. So this is the full track IDs tab. There's another tab here to build up the track ID. So if I wanted to relabel it and repack it slightly differently, then I could use this tab to do that.
So in some cases, maybe the pallet coming out of the distribution center, when it gets to the final, the smaller distribution center, maybe you don't want to just receipt that pallet as it is with its current track ID. You want to repalletize it. You want to pack like SKUs together or something like that. That's where you'd use the other option.
Yeah. So in the same way, that exact same one would pop up here. So on the PC, you could also do it on the PC. It'll warn you about the full pallets and say, would you like to do that? And you could clear the scans as well. And here it'll load the screen, much like our PO receipt screen again, and say, hey, you've already scanned 50 for that, but you've got some remainder that you can either build up on multi-stock code track IDs or scan full track IDs. So this would have been a simple GIT. If we wanted to do an SCT, and let's say we've used the same numbering as, so often in our SCT out, we use the pixlip number as the SCT reference. And this one again is suggesting to me, you've got a full track ID. I'm not going to scan any of it. I'm going to say done. And it's going to say you've got 500 left here. So I could go back into this and say, yes, I do want to scan that full track ID. Goes green. Say I'm done, and then I can go and allocate the remaining here and finalize it through.
Okay, so just to be clear on what Amy is doing here, she's showing a combination of scanner-based screens to do the receipt in, as well as PC-based screens to do the receipt in. So just to reiterate it, if you look at purchase orders right in the beginning, you could kind of build up pallets and do a receipt, or you could do a receipt all process onto a master tracking ID, then build up the pallets and put them away. Or you could do a straight scan-based transaction that brings the product in. Very similar with GRT. So I can use PC-based front end to build up the pallets and bring them in, or I can simply say, when it went out of the distribution center, we knew what was on the pallet. It already has a pallet number on it or a track ID number on it. So I'm simply using the scanner to confirm them and bring them in on the other side.
Correct. So no more relabeling. That's it. We are running out of time.
Yeah, we're pretty much done on time. We've got 10 minutes if we do the full hour. Just I have one question. Amy, can you bring up any HTML5 screen for me where you'd be, I don't know, processing some sort of receipt or transfer or whatever the case is? And And just let's have a look at that. So the question is this. What happens if a customer has barcodes on their product that are GS1 barcodes, and inside that barcode, the very nature of GS1 is that the barcode is a single barcode, but it has multiple entities inside it. And the entity may very well be, if you look at the barcode, that it's got the SKU in there, the supplier SKU number, it's got the lot number and the quantity all inside the barcode. So I'm doing the receipt. The supplier has put a barcode on the outside. So I only put one barcode on there, and it's got multiple elements within that barcode, right? And GS1s typically work like this. So the way we deal with that now, traditionally that was a bit difficult for us because in the Windows-based scanning version, you had to kind of interpret that. Now it's quite different. Because of these new HTML5 screens can very, very simply be scripted. Okay, what we simply do is we say, okay, here you got PO pre-receipt. We copy it away. We create a custom version of PO pre-receipt. We use the design kit to put some logic into the, let's say, into the very first screen, the very first thing we put in there. Let's say purchase order number. So we ask him to scan the bin. Then we stop at purchase order number. We rename purchase order number to a field called GS1, all right, as an example. And when he scans GS1, we put a little bit of scripting in the background that says, before you do anything, take that field that you've just scanned and interpret it. So understand which part is the stock code, which is the lot, and which is the quantity, and just immediately pre-populate the fields down and focus on the post button. So fairly easily, I can now take GS1 barcodes, and I can put some logic in there that says when I scan that supplier's barcode, populate my screen and just go straight to the post button. And that can be quite different, right? Because I can have a GS1 barcode from one supplier that if you look at the barcode, it's slightly differently configured. So you can put in additional rules in there. But essentially what you're doing is you're building a little bit of script straight into the screen that understands the GS1 barcode and extrapolates it out, populates the scanner-based screen, and just focuses on the post button. So I hope that answers the question, but it is becoming more and more prevalent that people are wanting to use GS1 barcodes in, and that's how we deal with it. Just want to check if there's other. Do you want to stop sharing on your side, Amy?
Sure, sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, I see that was the only question.
Yeah, there doesn't seem to be any others. Anybody else have a question you want to stick in quickly before we wrap up? Otherwise, we're going to wrap up in a minute or so. So just to get back to our final slide, we're on questions now. I think that's about it. Nothing further come in there, Amy?
No.
Okay, cool. Then I think we can wrap up. 54 minutes. We try and keep these things to an hour. It took a little bit longer than we were expecting, but it's important that we have our client base understanding the different receipting processes. Again, as usual, these webinars are all recorded in the next 2 days or so, probably on Monday. This webinar will be uploaded onto our website. So if you go to datascopewms.com, you'll find under content there, you'll find a webinar section and a video section. You'll find all the webinars under both of those two sections. So you can share them, share the link with other guys and so on. So thank you very much for attending. Hope it was useful for all to understand how we do these things. And we'll be having another webinar in January. I can't remember the date now, but we will send out a communication in relation to it. And so we're done. Thanks very much.